Thank you. And thank you for everybody joining us here on this fourth week. We immediately put this up. Uh, this fourth week is building out an intertemporal supply and demand model uh, with uh, which means production and demand. It's the first real link, if you will, in a supply chain model. And the linkage from period to period is going to be caused by having a warehouse inventory. So there's a very physical linkage. It looks a little bit like a financial model, but there are a couple of production constraints in it. And if we put labor and capital in it, we will have a rather sophisticated model. That thought, hold that thought for a moment. All right, hold that thought. There is capital here in terms of having something like warehouse capacity. Okay, we'll call that, and a safety stock. There are some capital constraints, and we also have production constraints. We have only so much capacity to make 11,000 widgets, whatever it is, pies in this case. And we have to have a minimum. Now, the minimum comes from a thought. Uh, if you're an aluminium smelter, you're like ArcelorMittal or Nucor or one of the uh, large steel or copper or aluminium making companies, you will have to literally convert raw material solid into molten mass. And that will require things like pots. And those pots are about the size of a city block. And just making those is an interesting idea. You can never turn them off, ever turn them off. If you do, the pots will become a great big ingot of aluminium or steel or whatever. Some processes simply need to live forever. And what engineers, manufacturing engineers, have figured out how to do is how to roll configurations, how to put innovations in and keep the process rolling. Okay. Now, these things are, I mean, that's industry on parade. These things are huge, cost a lot of money, but they produce this minimum production constraint. In the case of our pie making operation, we might also have constraints around sizing, lot sizing. And we talked about lot sizing in this week with the original lot sizing model, saying what is the optimal size, if you will, of a production. And then how many of those do we need? Those are called lots. So I got to make 144 iPhones at a time in order to get everything from holding costs and materials and all the other things that are costed in refrigeration in this particular case is an aspect of this particular company that we're modeling here, Make a Pie, their operation. You got to keep the refrigerators on all the time. You got to keep the deep freezes on all the time. So there's some minimum requirements going on. In this case, lot size and other physical things are being impounded into these 8,000 numbers. Now let's consider these periods. Let's call these weeks. They could be days, they could be minutes, they could be nanoseconds if you're looking at compute time. Um, and in this particular case, we have 6 weeks, and it might be a rolling 6 weeks as you go through. It could be months, in which case this is a half a year. Uh, Seasonality will be important as we go through time, possibly, because it might affect something like demand. So we have a beginning inventory in a 9,000 unit warehouse, another capacity constraint. We have maximum production. We only have so many machines and assembly lines making so much, whatever it is we're making. And that was also part of this week, looking at uh, a process line. It's a little bit like a mini supply chain. Uh, you got to receive materials, you got to prepare those materials, assemble them, put them together, cook them, and then package them and freeze them, and so on. There's a set process to go through in something as simple as seemingly simple as making pies, all under city, state, and federal regulation for food quality. You don't want anybody getting sick, obviously. Morally, otherwise you'd be bankrupt in our litigious society. So that those are all important aspects of what we have to consider. Uh, so in this model, we're laying it out in columns each and every period. And this is kind of the way an accounting presentation might look at it, a managerial accounting presentation might look at it. We have a beginning, uh, things happening, a beginning of period, that's at the top. So that's at the beginning of period one. And we have an end of period one. Okay. So T minus one is the end of the previous period, beginning of the next period. And that has to be kept in mind at all times. Okay. This is a discrete process. I know a lot of stuff will happen continuously, and we're keeping that as a maintained assumption that we have a start, stuff happens, and then we have an end. So it's really just three timing aspects: a beginning and end, and the stuff in the middle, the duration in the middle. That's how we're modeling this, and that's an important assumption. And it's laid out this way. We have production, calling it Y, inventory, we're calling it X. Uh, but we're also setting prices in this model, and demand. And demand is not given. Now, if we were doing a pure cost model, which this actually ends up being very similar to that, by the way, because of the way the constraints are, demand would be given. Somebody would be figuring out the demand for each and every one of these. Now, notice the demand does not depend upon supply. Okay? It's just there. But supply depends upon demand in this model. So demand's outside, and if I demand it, you better supply it, either through inventory or new production. That's it. Pretty straightforward. And then price it. Give me a price. So this is a wonderful economics model, actually. And I suspect if I were teaching even basic economics, this would be the model to do. And I would do maybe just period one for a while, and then say add another period and look at how they're related together. And you get about cost structures. Opportunity cost should be inside here as well. You have intertemporal. We can, a high school student, because we used to do this with high school students. My son was a guinea pig here. Um, can high school students think intertemporally? Of course they do. They plan their studies, they plan their time. Maybe they don't do it very well, but if they don't, then there are consequences, and then all of a sudden they learn how to do it well, especially pubescent youth, and they have a labor leisure trade off, big time, more leisure, and maybe that carries on into adulthood. That's entirely possible, and so they have all of these intertemporal, and within each time period, trade offs in the space of their decisions. Consumption versus leisure, famous one. In this model, we have trade offs between one period and another. another period, and it cascades downward to, in this case, period 6. All we have to do is add columns, and we can get more and more and more. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Uh, so very interesting. Now notice this warehouse capacity is period by period by period. Okay, that's important. And the safety stock is also period by period by period. So this can't fall below 1098. Notice it hits here at 1098 and cannot exceed 9,000. We got a lot of unused warehouse capacity, and somebody ought to address that. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe we got a bargain on it. Uh, maybe Simone Tortsier, who's the CEO, is thinking, "Yeah, I'm gonna convert that into a cafe, and that'll be next week's problem." All right, convert it into a cafe, attract people here, and show them what we're doing, and actually get some free marketing out of it in terms of focus groups and tests. Where you can go with this. Anyways, we have some space there. I'm thinking like down on downtown where there's all these wonderful old warehouses in southern Manhattan, which have been all rehabbed, paying for themselves because basically they're lofts with commercial space on the first floor. And we need that kind of commercial space here. Bazzini, that's the one I'm thinking. When I put this together, I was thinking of Bazzinis, the people who will crack the nuts and package the nuts and sell them to the whole world, and at least our world here. So you have that min max coming out of, this isn't just production economics. This is the physics of and the engineering of production. Demand, which is marketing, and inventory, which is storage, distribution, more physics, and in this particular case, refrigeration. Okay. We have holding costs per unit, pretty high actually. Okay, there we go. Where do these come from? Lots of work from Stefan's financial planning and analysis group. Right? This is what we used to call management information systems, MIS. It's all the transactional stuff where we boil down what it actually costs to do something, what the effort was, and how much you did, and lot sizes, and everything else can come from that, which is the other reason why we have transactional systems. Transaction systems for disclosure, yeah, but also to run our operation. And this is indeed where machine learning has come in to help us understand and say, especially where points of failure and points of success in the system, both of those rare events probably. And then there's the normal running of the system, and that gives you the idea of a distribution of costs. If these costs were distributed, like a normal distribution, and this is the mean, what is its standard deviation? And that can feed into our simulation very easily, especially if these folks are all correlated with one another. They're not independent. I'm sure they're somewhat correlated. Demand might be correlated with one another as well. That's because we have maybe a loyalty program that will forcibly correlate period by period demand because customers will come back. And if they don't like you, they won't come back. Word of mouth will also correlate you in the other direction. So word of mouth is still an important thing here. I think we could use that. So there we go. Where's the best? If somebody were to ask you, where in the entire city of New York, 5 boroughs, would you go and buy the best um, cake. What's the best cake? You make it with might make it with Philadelphia cream cheese. Yeah,
Juniors?
cheesecake. Cheesecake. Okay. What do you think is the best one?
Juniors, maybe in the city?
Nah,
No? That's the
no.
only one. That's all I got.
There. That's all you got. Oscar,
Yeah, I was gonna go with the juniors, but
your word. It's very good. Juniors. Sorry, juniors are very good. You can't beat S&S. Now S&S
S&S.
is on West 238th Street in the Bronx. It's like an industrial. It's like this kind of a place that you go. I think I need an escort in order to go in here. Door, and it has a plant there, and it's been making cakes for years. The best restaurants in the city use S&S.
Mm.
Now, I was thinking of S&S in terms of building this. Where the heck can they go? Well, I think they expanded their operation with Stella D'Oro. Stella D'Oro is also in the Bronx. And I think Stella D'Oro abandoned some of their facilities, so S&S moved in. But they're still the best. Don't know why. I think juniors, well, we'll do the best we can down here.
Stella D'Oro is still on the Major Deegan. I used to smell that as a kid growing up when we
Of
drive
course.
past.
I don't know if it is anymore. I don't smell it anymore, so I can't be there anymore,
All
right?
right. That's
I think it's
funny.
a I think it's a mall now,
Yeah, that's true. Come to
like
think
so
about it.
many other
There's like a
things.
Chick-fil-A and Target. Yeah,
Oh,
they
come
commercialized
on.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Gee whiz. Um, the other thing of note along that same route along Broadway is the company that invented, the milk carton,
Yep.
with the little tent at the top, and it was invented there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they go like, oh, I mean, you learn things simply by talk to the cheese guy, on Kingsbridge. He'll tell you everything because he's been there and he's
That's
been through it
funny.
all, right? They learned how to make the right kind of waxed and then later on plasticized paper, cardboard. Uh, they already knew how to shape it, and then they got the right design to make a spout, and it was sealed and it was tight, and because it was a big uh, rectangle, it fit all of the needs for transport. The cheapest transport. No glass. You can fit like I don't know how many gross more in a large truck over using glass bottles, and on and on and on. That's what we're talking about inside these models. That's all of that's embedded inside these models, not just a bunch of numbers. Anyways, waving my hands again. And production costs. Now these are variable. Uh, I have talked to more controllers about this. Okay, unless many controllers, for some reason or other, were trained. I don't know how they were trained, and I talk to the accounting people all the time on this one. I'm an economist, and I know that it has to be variable cost, not cost plus some share of the facilities. No, no, because the decision here is to make one more pie. And I know about activity-based costing and basis, using floor square footage for basis for making this. I think that is that's a separate decision, and thus we go back to lot size. Uh, I can build what's a standard size apartment? 1,000 square feet, plus or minus, right? Simply standard. It's got standardized. That's the lot size. Now, it's done. it's sunk. I want to add one more person to that apartment. It's not going to affect the cost of the apartment at all. I put 20 more people in. Yes, it will. I need another apartment. Okay. Two different decisions. So it's something to convince yourself of, especially if you have an accounting background or you're forced into this whole business of which I go through in great detail around in this course, that it's variable cost, not variable cost plus some sort of facility fudge. All right, something like that. So this is something to talk about maybe among yourselves, and what is your company's approach to this. SG&A is a real big problem in any company. COGS is a big problem. Cost of goods sold is a very every company I know of that I've ever worked with has had horrible problems. And then when the horrible problem is resolved by, well, that's what the accounting literature says. They had to have some anchor somewhere, put a stave in the ground. So think about that. Variable cost is really, really important, because this is the cost of making one more pie. That's the decision here. Make 11,000 or 10,343 or something in between 8,000 and 11,000. Okay, it's making one more pie, and we're not going to make one more pie more than exceeding some margin. Okay, we want at least positive margin here, and we'll get to that. Okay, so this is around the world. Let's just walk through it once. We start with this 5,000, might be 7,000, whatever it is. We add production. We add demand, and demand is price, right, times units sold. Okay, so this is the demand function. And this was the same one from, I think, the previous week. We start with 45,000, and it declines by 4,500. Okay, per pie. All right, that's just the demand, and it ends up being this number. Now, what is fed into this number? C5, the price. Now, the price and the production are the things we're actually solving for. So, in a sense, we're solving for demand. The demand is dependent upon price, and price is simultaneously solved for, as in a simultaneous equation, with production. That's what makes this a real interesting model. And at the bottom here, we get end of period. That's xt equals xt minus 1 plus yt plus demand qt, or minus demand qt. Okay, and then we shift this number up here. It becomes the beginning of period 2. End of period 1 is beginning of period 2. We go through the same stuff all over again. These two periods are linked by this number, which means demand from period to period is linked by inventory, which means that production and price, as they're solving, is linked period by period through inventory. Inventory is Einstein's relativity concept, special relativity, inside of economics. This is economics. When people realized that they could use linear programming to do this, they went nuts, because this is a hard problem to solve in calculus, which is what they were using, difference equations. You had to have some real specialized knowledge. There's a whole thing called the multiplier accelerator model of an economy that Paul Samuelson figured out. It's one of those models we have to know how to do in economics. It's basically this model for monetary and fiscal policy. I don't know how much economics you guys know. Again, I think I asked this last time. You had principles, I know that.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Principles is what I think that was the course I took most recent. Yeah.
Oh, good. And was it micro or macro?
Oh, I don't remember. It was for a previous degree.
Okay. Yeah. And on the micro side, we have production functions, we have consumer demand. You link those together and you get an equilibrium, supply and demand. You can also work back into the production function to figure out wages and the return to capital. All part of that factor price determination. But that all leaks into macroeconomics. In macroeconomics, income, national income, equals consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports minus imports. That's the entire thing. Inputs and outputs can be figured out. There's a huge input-output model that runs the country economically, which is being violated by every presidential administration I have ever worked with because they have a different goal. All right. But they use that as their base to figure out, well, how far can we go with our policies? Every single one of them does it because it is a major constraint. And it's run by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, among others. It comes up with most of those numbers. And all of that comes from a census or survey of service companies and manufacturers and so on as to how much capital they're using, how much labor they're using to produce how much of their widgets or whatever. It's a big process required by Congress since at least 1946. And all of this is inside of this model, actually, in microcosm here. And the reason why I asked you about that, what economics you have, is the economics to determine policy in the economy. Did you do ISLM? Is that anybody heard of ISLM? No.
Interest rates, I think.
Yeah,
It's fuzzy, but
yeah, IS meaning investment equals savings. That determines the goods market. LM is money demand equals money supply.
okay.
That also determines the asset market, like stock markets and so on. There's a portfolio of things there, and it's like cash conversion.
Gotcha.
And you put that together with a price process with supply and demand of labor and unemployment, and you have a pretty complete description of the economy, which if we were using this for 2008, and most of us in, at least on my side, and I was in the field at the time, use this modeling right in the back of an envelope. You could figure out what was going to happen next because of the crowding out that happened. Pretty straightforward. But a lot of people missed it because they were not on the side we were watching. We were watching the credit markets like you wouldn't believe, because those were my clients, and we were watching them crumble. They actually went underwater many times before that, notably in 2004. So those models are very important for policy setting and unemployment, but they're actually all fed by a gazillion one of these. Okay. All these decisions will eventually float up into the macroeconomy. Okay, and macroeconomics is really microeconomics in big aggregates. That's the other thing. All righty. So here's our linkage. So think about this linkage, how this affects this and then affects this and this. Boom, look, it's like a sawtooth. Up, up, down. And we kind of end here. We can keep going. So this is a very finite horizon. We could have this thing going on forever. It'll just keep chugging along as long as somebody keeps the lights on. Okay. And we could add and subtract capacity here. That is another aspect of simulation. What if I put this whole thing down to something much tighter? That's a very narrow. I predict that all of these will be 1,000 up here. And why I know that, because of that. Now, this all gets set up inside a solver, which you should have on your machine. Do you have solver all set up?
I do. Yep.
Yeah, and it's under the odd place. It's under the data tab. I don't know why. I would have thought they would have put it under the formula tab where all the analysis, but it's because they have the forecasting and all this stuff over here, which I use. This is where we use the data table and goal seek. Scenario manager, goofy. We can do that someday. I have not played very much with this forecast sheet, but I know what's in it. Okay, so here's the model. And we're maximizing something. I just wanted to bring this up because we're going to be maximizing something called margin. And I wanted to show what we're changing. These are the variable constraints. So actually, if I do this, and I did from here down, over, I can just take that whole block and put it in there like that. And then I have these constraints here. Let's change. Why don't you put in word edit? I never understood this one. So that's C4. That's all of these productions have to be less than or equal to the max. Okay, so just read those off. Say okay. And C4, the production, has to be greater than or equal to the C9 series. So this takes us period 1 to period 1, and period 2 and period. Okay, these are all both and logical results. All of these are both and. This greater than this less than this. Okay, that's what will happen there. And then we have another set of constraints at C5. These are prices. And it's useful in this model. It'll solve faster if you constrain prices to be some sort of max price. Now, that's not unusual. I think marketers think that all the time. What's the most I can charge for this? Type of thinking. And the least is, well, I don't want to think about a least, but you could think about a least pretty easily. So in these sorts of models, which end up being nonlinear, just like the other models we did this week in the book, this price will be less than or equal to any of these prices. So again, period by period, 5, C to then D, then E, then F, then G, then H. And then we got this interesting thing. This is an inventory constraint. We have and it's coded in green. And probably should code all these other ones in green as well because they're constraints. Decisions in yellow and these in green. But this one says that each period shall not be, will always be greater than a safety stock. Okay, we do this at home. Uh, we have one more. I mean, we went nuts the other day because there's nothing else on the shelf. And where was the safety stock? We went into the pantry and found one more almond milk, and we're going like, oh my god, we better go out and get some more almond milk. Safety stock, everybody uses it, right? Right. Except we don't have an inventory system. It's all visual inspection. And this same series, any one of these has to be less than the warehouse capacity. We have huge warehouse capacity, which again signals somebody needs to look at that. Okay, that's the other use of these models. And if we solve this, because remember what we changed, I made production tighter. My prediction is it's all going to go blow out to 9,000. I'm going to solve it quickly. Yeah, my prediction. Pretty close. 8,000 here because I had a lot of inventory. Aha. All right, that's how that will work. So you can play games with this. Now, here are the inventory costs. I really should put this in some sort of thick outside borders. Okay, I have inventory costs and production costs. Those are the only two categories that I have. Inventory costs to store things. Okay, so we have a cost of 66 cents a pie to store it. Might need refrigeration, might need deep freeze, whatever it is. And we have people. There's a labor component to that as well. So I derive a lot of these numbers inside of the book. They all come from analyses much deeper than this, maybe 2 or 3 levels deeper than this, in order to understand where things are coming from and where that 66 cents might come from. And up to 65. Okay. Why has it changed? I don't know. I just made it up probably. And 295 from the variable cost constraint. Okay. And that's a question that, again, you've got to convince yourself of its variable costs, not variable costs plus a little fudge. I don't know. It goes into the officers' fund. I don't know where it goes. You know, but this is on that decision has already been made and paid for, frankly, right? Now, what this variable cost might be, though, might be the cost per pie. I don't know. Is rent a variable cost? Now, I had to rent my space as an officer of a corporation. I literally had to rent my space and the space of everybody. That was taken out of my hide and not just mine, out of anybody who worked technically for me. That was at Deloitte. That was at Ernst & Young. That was at CRA, Charles River Associates. That was at Alvarez and Marcel. We owed the boss's boss money, and the boss would, make the envelope, hand the envelope to the boss, and the boss would aggregate those things and put it into an envelope to her boss, and so on, all the way up. Right? How companies actually operate. Got to pay for everything. Nothing comes free, Bill. Yes, I know. I'm an economist. Why are you keeping reminding me of that? Okay, so we get total cost, production and inventory, holding cost, refrigeration, leasing, insurance. Think that way. Maybe rent. Right?
Hey, Bill, I'm sorry.
Rent
Sorry to make perhaps a slight tangent, but was that rental cost from your office coming out of your operating expenses, or how did they? How did they divide?
Yeah, well, yeah, it did. It did.
It did.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh yeah. No, actually, you know where it actually came out of? It came out of our profit pool at the end.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we actually ran on a variable cost approach, and it was billable hours fundamentally. Uh, that was our basis.
Fixed
And
price or based on a percentage?
based on no, we solved this problem. This is our these would be the billable hours. This would be the what we would charge in our contracts.
Okay.
Okay, same idea there.
Good.
So it's whatever your base is. Billable hours is easy, except that you had a mix of billable hours. My billable hours rate was $855 per hour. That's what somebody had to pay me. Did I ever get paid? No, and I certainly didn't get paid that. So, and the model for service organizations is okay. You want to make $500,000 a year? All right. Okay, let's see how that works. And you work backward into it's the same way that Robert Irving does restaurant pricing on Food Network. Um, uh, 1/3 costs, 1/3 labor, 1/3 for the boss. It does work out that way, actually. There's an old rabbi in like 3rd or 4th century who writes that. He says it's the 1/3 rule. It works actually very well. It's one of those things. Works quite well. So whenever we hired somebody, we'd look at their ability to make billable hours. We look at their billable hour rate and work backward to one aspect of what their salary would be, and then we would bump it up probably. So everything was very much aligned. That was always on the back of the envelope. But did we have inventory? Yeah, we had inventory, lots of inventory. We had backlog, and we had negative inventory too because we were short many times for one reason or another. It might be because we didn't have enough people. They were assigned to something else. At which point I had to negotiate their release, and or I need the money they're making for you to land in my account. It often didn't, and there's politics, so there's all of that, but all out of a model like this, kind of interesting.
Thank you.
But it's also a different way of thinking, isn't it? About your organization. What I mean, we have one kind of production here. There might be other kinds of production. Okay, if you're an engineering organization, it used to be how many drawings did you make? Something like that. Something as simple as that. Yeah. So it's interesting. Here we have total cost of 188,000, and now revenue is the sum product of our solved for prices times demand. Okay, it's real simple. It's arithmetic. That's why I say high school kids could figure this out. I give them a 2-period problem, they could figure it out. Why? Because it's multiplication and addition and subtraction and a little bit of ratios. They had to know from 6th grade how to do what's 22.5% of something. Okay, so that worked. I can't remember where that came from. I can't remember where that came from. That might be just a ghost of an analysis past. And then you get margin. Revenue minus cost is margin. Now this is our objective. Okay. If we have a famous one where we have a cost organization, where this was a study done for the city of Montreal. snow removal, moving snow from 15 city districts to 8 dumping sites. Okay, so that's an interesting problem in and of itself. And there were two. You would run the model, which is pretty easy to do. It's a simple scheduling model actually, with a cost per removal, and also an environmental cost at the dumping site. Because you can imagine, when you remove snow, you're removing more than snow, right? You're removing roadway, gravel, anything that seeped into the snow in the meantime. It is an environmental issue. And you got to be careful not to put dumping sites near known aquifers, for example, or else your water will not won't only taste good, but will probably kill you. So we work those models and actual case, and did 2 of these. One objective was reduce the amount of environmental harm, and that was measured very carefully and so on. That we got a measure for that. Reduce that, and the other was reduce costs. So we had 2 aims here, 2 aims, and you had to mix those 2 aims relative to something that's not in the model called what's your preference, which one you want to go for. It's a trade-off, and you could show the trade-offs, and you would show the trade-offs to the managers, and somebody would come in and say, this is the trade-off we want. We want to, in this political cycle, favor the environment. In this political cycle, favor the cost. And you get very different results in both cases. So it's possible to mix this. That's called goal programming, which is an advanced topic. But I'm happy to show you that model sometime in a separate seance, because it's a very instructive model.
That's starting to slightly shift.
Yep.
Now a little, Bill. The most recent extreme discussions around the environment and climate, it's still on the table, but not nearly as much as affordability. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of environment. Like we have this problem in terms of our international trade as well. When we um, um, when we have somebody else make something because it's cheaper, that's called comparative advantage, in another region or in another country. It doesn't matter. And the reason why it's too expensive for us, we say, is labor. That's one. That's why everybody hates the unions. Um, but I'll go with quality there because I was a member of a union, and I'll tell you, if we
Yep, so was I.
yeah, geez, we learned things that the scabs did not know, and they blew up boilers. I mean, you can't blow up a boiler, but you can really disable it. You can run it in such a way that it's irreversible. It's gone.
Yep.
And that's like a $50,000 job immediately, plus in a large building. It's just right out of pocket. Um, there's a quality issue that we're willing to pay for. There's the air and the water issue that we're willing to pay for, and so we send that same production over to another country that doesn't care about that. And obviously their costs are going to be lower. Number one, they don't pay the workers the same. Number two, they do not regulate. They don't care where their water or air come from.
Yep.
And we know who those examples are. We also know that they're reeling around and suffering the consequences after 30 years of doing that. Is it 30 years? No, almost 30 years. It's 29 years since China, for example, got most favored nation status from the Clinton administration, which opened up trade like you wouldn't believe. but it also meant that we exported our um, our pollution to them. That's how an economist thinks about it. We exported our pollution to them. And now they have the opportunity cost years down the line in medical, uh, people just being angry outright and not wanting to work. Uh,
Mm.
the fabric of their culture is changing as a result, not in the way that they wanted to, and on and on and on, which is why they shifted their dangerous production off of the coast beyond the Shanxi Mountains into the west, and they're polluting that area instead. So they exported that to another area, and they're going in revolution mode over there, the workers. So it has consequences. Is all I'm saying. It's,
Yep. It does.
it has huge consequences. The other side of it is transport. Uh, if you they're a great example of coal by wire. So they would have a mine mouth coal operation. We used to do the same here. We do the same here as well. A mine mouth coal operation where the mine mouth, you build a power plant there, and then you set up a transmission facility from there to wherever, okay, to hook up to the nearest interconnect. Now, that's right of way. That costs money too. And if you are environmentally concerned about habitats and how fragile they are, especially with global change happening, however it's happening, solar flares are a really good reason why it's happening right now. We'll take that for the moment without the political stuff. Blame the sun, for a while instead of us, although we're the problem, but we won't go into that. Then you are in a sense exporting your at the destination point. You're exporting back to the mine mouth all of the production issues. Okay. Now the other way to do it is to cart the coal uh, from the mine mouth to a local production plant. And if it's New York City, you know how well scrubbed those things would have to be and are. we live to scrub smokestacks of all sorts of problems, SO2, NO2, all of the other VOx and NOx of volatiles and so on. Many countries don't do that. So we say there's a comparative advantage. I don't believe there is. I mean, you put the full cost in, human beings are human beings. And, if you see, there we go, affordability versus environment. And hidden inside of that might be this other trade off. Yeah. I'll give you one more example. The thing that really, three Hicks from upstate New York are traveling China to relocate a coking facility. Now, coke is not South American coke. This is baked coal, and you use baked coal in making chromium steel, good sturdy steel. So they have coking operations in China, and they were using what are called antique beehive, and you can look this up, where you bake it in a big oven, right? Instead of baking it safely with chemical process and environmental constraints in a chemical factory. No, this thing's an oven, literally like the kind of oven you would bake bread in or pizza. And the stack out of the top, well, when you bake coal, what's in it? Anything in it gets thrown up the stack and out. First of all, the heat will drive it up, and it's also lighter than air. What goes up? The most beautiful orange, yellow, and blue and red colors you've ever seen in your life. the most noxious chemicals on the planet are thrown up into the atmosphere. But that's not the worst of it. You have to have a human being at the top called a lid man, which will periodically open. I don't know why they didn't automate this, but they didn't. It's cheaper to use a human being who will live to the age of 39, 39, 40, 41 years old and then die horribly. Well known, and that's called the lid man. And the Chinese government used to, take care of the family. They changed that regulation in '95. So,
Wow.
but we had the same thing here, and we match marked a entire facility on the Delaware River that was old generation, but a hell of a lot safer than the beehives, to China, and it eventually made it there. There was a lot of financial aspects to this and a lot of political aspects to this, and FCPA issues as well, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act issues. So that happened, and they were erected there. The Chinese had incredible chemical engineers who knew all about how to do this. Been wrangling for this for years. Their academic community had been decimated twice before all their research and so on by two cultural revolutions. So they quickly recovered, and I think they hold patents in the thing now worldwide, how to do it and how to do it well. But you see quality of life. Now that costs more doing it that way than the old way. Well, what's the cost of a human being? Is what it amounted to. How do you value him? You don't value a human being on money. You only do that in the court to get a settlement for, to replace wages lost or something, or medical needs, let alone punitive. But you see that is really an interesting practical decision that you have to make. Those kinds of decisions are all, we can model them in this framework. Irrational choice, but the non this is rational from a point of view. Choosing just margin is a choice that the model doesn't make. The modeler makes, or the person hiring the modeler makes. And now you just gave a really good one: affordability, environment. Now they're going to trade off. You're going to have to do both because you're going to have environmental constraints, right? Yeah. Still, maybe,
Still,
maybe,
right.
maybe they got rid of them all already.
Yeah, it's quite. But I'm interested. I'm not surprised because like you alluded to, Bill, to be environmentally sound when it comes to a business, especially in energy, is costly. Everything's gonna, go up in price, and it's not easy
Right.
to do, and then ratepayers and the ratepays have to pay for it, unfortunately. But what I am interested in seeing is potentially the shift in the political world, because even at hearings, politicians now have shifted also most of their conversation to affordability, and now it's up to the utility company to basically more or less educate these politicians to say we are trying to abide by this climate change order and CLCPA and everything that has to do with adjusting our business, but this is why it's so expensive, and to see how perhaps legislation will change so that way, to your point, we wouldn't have to be so restricted in what we have to do to, for the environment, or maybe there's a different longer term plan. So I'll be interested to see that the shift in the politics also.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah. Again, the rule that I have made. See, my original background has nothing to do with economics, so, which is probably good. And the rule for me is this is this is a subset, what we're looking at on the screen, of a set of political choices. And political choices to me are a subset of moral choices.
Hmm.
Ultimately, it's morality. You cannot separate these.
Hmm.
They're not. Political is alongside economic, is alongside a moral. No, no. One is encased in another. And this is a necessary condition. You've got an it's necessary that if you choose and you have all of this going on, that you do analysis like this. It's necessary. Uh, and then at the next level of political, it's necessary to take into account constituency requirements and
Hmm.
issues, which might mean, okay, you have a margin on this side, you have issue number one, issue number two, issue number three, and this gets embedded in that analysis. But more so for me, what's the right thing to do? Right. That's politics doesn't tell you what the right thing to do is, no more than economics tells you what the right thing to do is. It's the right thing to do contingent on some higher ordering
Yeah.
value. If you don't value human beings, well,
Hmm.
that's dead easy. You're done. We got the thinnest possible view of the human good here. Very thin. I mean, like molecule atom thinness, nanometer thinness.
Hmm.
But it's not sufficient. And politics is the next level up, which I think intermediates the physical, practical. I gotta write a contract. I gotta build a plant. I've got to find customers willing to pay. Blah blah. All of that very important, obviously. But all of that gets addressed at the political area, which helps kind of the higher level of order. But where does the politics come from? And now I think the politics has again separated from morality, or the morality is the politics, whatever. And the morality is now a matter of conforming reality to my way of thinking, which I think is the most dangerous thing on the planet. And,
Yeah.
and that's acting like a 2-year-old. When you guys get to have your 2-year-olds, you will find that they have a view of the universe and they're going to try to conform you to their view. And you know that you should not do that. No. So imagine 2-year-olds running the universe, the 2-year-old mentality. Well, that's a narcissistic approach. All 2-year-olds are fundamentally narcissists because they're
Sure.
forming their view of themselves and the world. And they can talk, which is really scary, and express their views and say no,
Right. Right.
stamp
Right.
their feet and have a tantrum, or go along with you, which will go like, oh, thank you, God, at least one day or 1 hour. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. So I'm thinking, yeah, right now the discussions, and so the moral thing to do for you who know what the consequences are is you actually see your customers
Hmm.
in a situation where they're not well anymore because
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
environmental issue. You're going to see it first.
Yes.
See it first. Um, and the hawk migration. We used to count the number of hawks. There's an escarpment overlooking on the south, John Thatcher Park, Heidelberg, is it Heidelberg Escarpment? Anyways, where the Mohawk Nation lived around there. They're like the people of the Flint. This is where you get Flint from. And it's an escarpment at the northeast edge of the Catskills, overlooking the Mohawk Valley. And you can see Rockefeller's ditch over there, the thing he built and so on, the Capitol and so on. Now, off of this, you can see Mount Marcy on a clear day in the Adirondacks. That's how good it is. Just the top of it, because the earth is still curved, so far as I know. Um, Although they're probably saying it isn't now. They have a new physics. They're basically saying Einstein didn't know anything. There's another person that said that too, and burnt his books. I'm going to give you two more stories after this, because I just have what I'm hearing is really amazing. So we would go up there and count hawks and get an average, build models of hawk counts, often with volunteers. Our utility did this because it was a measure of environmental stability, improvement, and degradation. More hawks. Hawk is a apex predator. More hawks means more varmints that they're eating, which means things are doing very well. It was one of the many measures we use to measure environmental capability, because that was our entire remit, that whole area, with hydro and with we controlled an awful lot of water. Oh my God, the amount of water. Janet Audenson was our hydro vice president. She was amazing. This person knew what a head of water was down a run of the river and so on. But it was all environmental because everything's so fragile, and we were adamant about it. We had R&D about it. We had support from the Public Service Commission. We were in a heavily urbanized environment. Like New York City is a totally different animal. I don't know. It's a different world here than up there. But hawks, another way of doing this. Yeah, very interesting. This model works. You can see this is what you have to put in. But I think the thing is just try to replicate this model. That's all I'm asking you to do. You can put whatever numbers in you want. You can break this model. The best thing to do is to break this model. I love that. See where this won't solve, and then you work back as to why it won't solve. And I think that is super, super important. Again, I'm motivated by these horrific pictures that we took that were confiscated by the Chinese government of the lid men going up and smiling and waving at us as he's being marched off to death. I mean, it was just like old days in the Industrial Revolution. He's doing it for the state. Yes, we need steel. Steel. And they had horribly, horribly dirty coal at that point. By the 90s, I think it was like almost lignite. You have anthracite, bituminous coal, and lignite. Lignite's it's very, very dirty. And that's the motivator. That's the motivator. Now, everything should go solar, right? Yeah, and wind. You know what it takes to build a solar machine from a pollution point of view? It's semiconductors. Look into that sometime. It's not much better. Lithium batteries. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah. So, just and rare earth. That's the other big thing going on here. 99.9% of all production in the world is controlled by China. That's a heck of an industrial policy. They got that right from their point of view. Yeah, you basically have to go to them for that if you want to have this computer. Very simple. And our entire economy is now, and it's not just it's gone back to a knowledge economy. It's an information, but it's really a knowledge economy with the AI piece. Yeah. Yeah. I think they're also on the far side of the moon. Somebody was making that comment recently. We're not there yet. Anyways, Elon must be there. I bet Elon's there. Okay. I don't have. I have 25 more stories. I don't record those. But I think the stories are important because all of this is interesting. But if
Very.
you don't have the story behind what and how and whatever else we can do, notice I
Yeah.
was able to predict that. I'm curious. I'm just going to open this valve up. I bet it will just take in as much of it as possible. And watch that margin go up. Watch that margin. It's only 200,000, and still the same demand structure. This demand structure probably will be no longer valid at 25,000, and probably these costs as well. So grant that for a moment, and let's see if we can produce 25,000 pies and get away with it. I'm game. Valentina's game for sure. There you go. It didn't. It didn't. It only did this. Now, why was that? That should have bounced it right up. That's the minimum, and it still only goes to here. But I got this at 25,000. That doesn't make sense. See, these things have to make sense. Da, 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 da. Okay, everything is the same. 10. Yep, here it is. It's the first one. Less than or equal to 25,000. Okay, that seems to be correct. 9,000 seems to be the number. I'm going to put it to 10,000. See, this is the stuff you have to do with models. Don't trust your intuition. Trust the model structure, because that's where you're embedding things like intuition. I'm going to solve this. No, it's keeping the old solution. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in 0. Force it. Because this is a highly nonlinear. Look at that. Okay. I'm going to see what happens now. We start from 0. Yeah, we're at minimum now. We start from 0. What if we start from, you see what's happening with this model? Initial conditions matter in the optimization routine. And I think that's the last bit of story we're going to need. If we put in 12,000 as a starting value. Okay. And we're breaking this rule here. I think this is the rule that's going to govern what this can possibly be in this. So we put in 10,000, it's going to 10,000.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think, and it's going to 8 here. If you change this initial, so you're solving, so just so you know, you're solving a simultaneous system of differential equations here. So you can talk to your engineers about that. Hey, I had a great time this week. I was solving differential equations. Of course, they were difference equations simultaneously. And, initial conditions are very important. And you'll see if the engineer's eyes glaze over, they said they must have had a tough time doing differential equations in the engineering program. So initial conditions are very, very important. Okay. And look at that. That margin isn't much higher. It's 207 to 235. And that's where we're going to get some sensitivity analysis. I'm going to do one more for you because I want to show you one last thing on this. I want a sensitivity analysis. And that will give us something interesting. And the sensitivity report, you can look at reduced gradients and so on, is something called the Lagrange multiplier. If you change this constraint, this is the operative constraint that matters. If you change this constraint by 1 unit, it doesn't have any effect, zero effect on margin. The first one, if you could, that first period, if you change that inventory constraint somehow by 1 unit, and the way you would do it is the initial condition, you will increase revenue by this much. Okay, so 1 pi produces $200, I guess, something like that. No, it can't. 1,000. Oh, that can't be. That's interesting. I gotta. What was the dimension of this? No, very, very small. This is almost right. $52 a profit. 1 pi? Don't think so. 1 pi in inventory, maybe. Yeah. So that's something to think. 1 unit of inventory in this model. And even the pricing starts up and goes down and comes up. That's another aspect of this to look at. We have no true pricing constraint in here, but initial conditions really, really matter. If I start out with 9,000 warehouse capacity, I've got warehouse capacity, and solve for this again. Okay. Look at what happens. Our prices dip and come back up again. I got some movement in price caused by that initial inventory condition. And then it just breaks out. It gets as much production as you can possibly do it. All within, there's our 9, all within this constraint. We have a lot of unused warehouse capacity. Question to the group would be, what production capacity do we need to fill out our warehouse capacity, or are we going to be demand constrained? That's a tough question here. That's a tough question. And then our pricing, what price should we charge? I would go for average pricing after a while, because I want to keep my customers happy and not surprise them too much. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, there we go. You can ask a lot of questions of this and get some interesting answers. But again, if you guys get to talk to engineers who still remember their differential equation scores, this is a major result from physics mainly. Initial conditions matter. A small change in initial conditions creates huge chaos elsewhere. That's a standard result. You see it in models like this all the time. Okay. I think that's enough palaver for the day. And those are good questions and good discussion. Thank you for that. Let's see if we can bring this back into. Okay. Stop sharing and go back to, there we go. And I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thank you very much for your wonderful attention. And we'll see you on the next round. This is really a good place to stop as well. Take care. All right.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.